got 3 packages here. I think each with only one thing in it. So this one is important because it was pointed out last week that this in particular had come, but didn't even arrive until yesterday. And even then it was actually scheduled to arrive 2 days from now. And Jesus Christ, it's not focusing. But we'll see. Let's see. Each of these are basically going to be opened in a different way, I think. The first one was rip it to shreds. That one was... This feels like it has 2 in it. This one is find this thing at the top and open it. And now it's being a stubborn little piece of crap. Die. So, as you can see, we've got InuYasha Blu-ray Set 2, which feels like Set 1 was released very recently. So this is coming out, I feel like, much faster than a lot of stuff. I wonder. There's a part of me that wonders, well, I'm wondering, Region A. This probably tells us which episodes it has. That says 20-something episodes. I think. Actually, we got the episodes right there. That's actually going to be 20. 58 would be 31. So 31 minus. Yeah. Anyways, 28 episodes. 28. Pretty discs. Not very anime discs. But still pretty. Cool. Try Knights. Not sure what to think about it. I see a bunch of guys, but I don't know much about what they might do. Is that a football? Let's actually open it up because I feel a loose disc. I want to get that seated. And then take a peek at the back where I see Region A, I see Japanese with, so subtitled only. Pretty much your standard special features. And then a closer look at the discs. Next up we have Legend of the Galactic Heroes. I was thinking that was saying disc something 3, but no, that's season 2. This is the remake and not the old one that was sold for $1 billion. Which of course I got. Oh look, I got the sticky off, and now we get, I thought that was Sexy Man Stash, but that's actually an open mouth person. But you know, from a distance and with your eyes a little bit blurry, it looks kind of like Freddie Mercury. We got regions A and B. Looks like an English dub. Special features. You know, just the Texas opening song. So pretty straightforward. Caught by the gravity of war. Ow. Usually I use the clippers for extra tenacious plastic crap like this, but I don't know, that this is convenient. This plastic is being annoying. I don't know much of these people. And is that the same open mouth guy? Because it still looks like Freddie Mercury from a distance. Yeah, I just wanted to turn it like this because season 2, this is disc 3. So I don't think this is a season 2 part 2. I think each season 3, 4, 3, 4. This is a DVD and Blu-ray combo. With everybody going pretty much Blu-ray only for a lot of their releases, it's nice to see some of that stuff. And then last but not least we have Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon Season 2. 12 episodes plus OVA. Static electricity is apparently my enemy today. It would be the episode of Static Shock where Static misbehaves. Anyways, I see girl with kind of a thin cut thing, and then Hestia. I don't remember her name. I can barely remember any names. Region A, 12 episodes OVA. There's an English dub, so it's nice that that's consistent for anybody wanting consistency in that regard. Yeah, okay. I'm glad I did thumb through and rewatch some of the stuff, because I don't think Sword Oratorio reminded me of stuff. Although I don't recognize this person, but hopefully that's natural. I'm not sure if there was a DVD version, but I'll double check that. Otherwise, here's this week's anime DVD collection update.
So, fortunately, I still have Million Arthur on the top here. Not because I watched any more of it. I, am still just doing whatever I do. But because it's kind of interesting, because I watched Astra Lost in Space, and I thought this was good. And it's really interesting to see how these two shows do something sort of similar in the beginning, but Astra, I would say, is a good beginning, whereas Million Arthur is not. So I mentioned before that Million Arthur, the main problem with the first episode that made me not really not want to continue, but maybe didn't give me any real motivation to continue past the first episode, was that I identified that the main characters were pretty much a bunch of Mary Sues. And so it pretty much came down to, well, I thought the character designs were neat, but you can see character design in passing kind of leave. So it didn't give me any reason to continue staying on board to find out, okay, am I interested, etc. And one thing I don't think I specifically mentioned is the first episode begins with a quick flash forward scene to later in the first episode, where I guess you just see our characters beat up a big army of other characters who all are wielding Excaliburs, but it's being whatever. Anyways, and it's a really good example of how not to do, because it feels like the show kind of gave us, so it's off to the wrong foot in that very first scene, just because all it establishes is, oh, here's these cool characters, but I don't understand, I'm not curious about the stuff, well, maybe just a little bit curious, but not like, oh wow, I really need to find out more sort of curious. It's like, okay, well, they're calling them Arthurs and Excaliburs, and oh, they're powerful, I don't know why, but it commits a major sin of them being Mary Sue's even there, because it's just like, they're not acting like people who are actually powerful, they're acting more like people who are written to be powerful and the universe bends to their will, which, is a very Mary Sue sort of thing. So, like, the very first scene kind of establishes that, and then the rest of the first episode doesn't really give you more to work with. It's just like, well, here's these characters, here's these personalities, but nothing that makes me say, okay, I definitely gotta watch this. And, you're gonna have some people that are interested in it, and they're like, oh, I kind of want to see these people, and, that's their own preference, but I think for most people, they're kind of looking for something else in there, or something in addition to that sort of stuff. And so let's talk about Astra Lost in Space. So It does the same thing where it actually has a scene from later in the first episode at the very beginning of the first episode. And I'd say it's actually off to a really good start. First of all, it doesn't commit any grave sins of giving us any reason to think, oh, this character is just an overpowered Mary Sue. So we're not spotting any obvious literary problems like that. Instead, you just kind of begin with this girl in a space suit just kind of spinning around in space. You see luggage around her. You don't see anybody else. She's just there kind of alone. I think kind of above a planet. But, you know, it's a really good experience where basically, and I don't mean like it's a fun experience or you go through it and you feel good. I mean, it's an experience and they do a good job of portraying it because, you know, you're there and you're like, oh shit, and she's having trouble stabilizing herself, and you kind of see this guy coming in, and for you the entire time you don't know who she is, you don't know how she got there, you don't know what's going to happen to her. And it really especially works that they haven't introduced her at all, because, you know, she's probably so confused that she doesn't even think that it would be relevant for her to know. She probably is like, how the fuck did I get here? What's going on? I'm confused. And so her confusion is kind of portrayed for us, the audience, just because we're also just kind of thrown into this thing, which looks like she was just thrown into. You know, people usually don't plan to be spinning around in space with their luggage floating everywhere, basically. But yeah, you can kind of gather that she's not like an astronaut. She was clearly traveling. Okay, what happened? What was going on? Good stuff. And like I said, you're kind of interested in how she gets out of that situation. Now, that wouldn't be something that would be an entire series carrying thing, which maybe could. So it's kind of similar to the movie Gravity in that way, where there's a very personal experience of this horrific, scary thing that is kind of space, I guess. And I think people had problems with the movie Gravity. I thought it was okay. I actually thought Astro Lost in Space was better for the most part, but there are definitely other things about it that are potentially weakening. But you know, I think there was a similar kind of thing. Anyways, what was I saying? So then the first episode. Now, to give a Million Author a little bit of credit, this is a longer first episode. This is one of those double episode length first episodes, and it's good in that regard. There's things there where you're like, I don't know if I trust that could actually be a thing, but I'm okay with whatever. You know, it's things along the line of, oh yeah, they're doing a little bit of faster than light travel. Yeah, you know, I still am not convinced that we're ever going to find a way around that sort of law of physics, but at the same time, it's fun to play what if and to introduce the scenarios that are introduced by that. And you know, it's pretty much, yeah, they're like that. But let's see. So one potential weakness in the first episode is our main cast of characters are kind of iffy. Like, I don't mean like they're questionable reputation sort. I mean they're like, I kind of don't like their attitude. I kind of don't like their attitude. I kind of don't like their attitude. I like his attitude. I like her attitude. You know, kind of somewhere around there. That guy's hard to read. Could be the kind of person whose attitude I don't like. So you kind of got that mix of stuff, but it still kind of moves forward. It's okay. It really helps that I would call them the main two characters, but the show does a really good job of having us start out kind of with them and having them be notable for story progression, but the other characters kind of are as well. In that regard, it's kind of more fleshed out group of people. And it says Lost in Space, and the thing you have to know about this definition, like, there's concepts of Lost in Space like the old Lost in Space series where it's like, we have no fucking clue where we are. This one, they know where they are. They're just in a place where nobody would be able to find them. So this would be like being lost in the woods, except you know where you are in the woods, and you're like, okay, guys, we're gonna have to travel for 5 days in that direction, and we know how to make sure we're always going in that direction. Because right, that's one of the dangerous things about, you know, you could easily lose your way, end up going in circles or something like that, and get lost where you don't know where you are. But yeah, so this is the distinction between those lost, because that kind of tells you, okay, this isn't what can we even do. This is how do we make something happen. And it's entertaining in that regard. There's only a handful of alien worlds we see on it, but they feel like interesting ideas. I wouldn't call them fully fleshed out ideas, but I'd say that there was more thought put into them than you might normally see on, hey, we're landing on an alien planet. Now, of course, some of that involves, you know, problems where it's like, oh, well, this is an ocean planet, so pretty much everything just looks like ocean stuff as we would expect it here. And this one is a fungus planet, and yeah, there's some of that stuff where it's kind of like they come up with ecosystems, but I'm not sure if it's entirely convincing that those ecosystems could evolve into that, which is kind of why, you know, it sometimes feels like they're really designed stuff. But at the same time, there's just enough ideas floating around that you kind of just enjoy it, and the characters, you get to kind of enjoy what they're going through. Yeah, where you yeah. So if there's a real weakness to the series, though, I'd say it's with the ending, because like I said, there's this whole element of it begins with an experience, it moves forward with you know, there's interesting moments with experiences, there's neat ideas, but there is this kind of bigger story that kind of opens up and develops as the show goes. And I would actually call this a weakness, because at the end of the show, especially since where it began was a very an experience sort of thing, that kind of sets you up for wanting for there to be basically an ending that's an experience as well. And there's a little bit of it there, but because they opened up this bigger story thing, it does end up not really overshadowing it, but just kind of drowning it out a bit. So there's bits and pieces of it there, but it's like, nope, but we got to resolve all these bigger things that we also kind of raised, and it weakens the ending. It doesn't make it a bad ending, it just makes it where it's an okay ending. It's not one that you're like, oh yeah, this is the fucking ending I wanted. So it's kind of interesting. Oh, the other problem is, because they set up this thing, they also unintentionally made it where the ending could only be just a little bit anticlimactic. Because normally with a story, when you introduce hurdles, they're supposed to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you get to the end, so that, you know, you kind of feel like, you know, the character's built up to taking on this final monumental task. But I didn't feel like the task was actually that monumental. I mean, it kind of is based on the way the story is, but you don't really feel like the characters are like applying what they've learned per se. It's more like they're applying what they've come to I guess handle about reality. Now, to give it a little credit, the bigger story does tie into the personal experiences a lot better than you would think it would, because normally you'd have a show that kind of starts with one, but then it really has the other, and they don't mesh perfectly. Like, you can kind of tell, oh, that was the one they really wanted to tell, and this other one was an excuse. But no, in this case, they both kind of mix together pretty well. So overall, you know, it's, even though it stumbles a little bit, it's not bad. It's, yeah, I'd call it good, because, you know, even if the ending was only okay, that wasn't the only part of the show. It was just kind of entertaining as it went along. And there's other things that are kind of iffy about it, but for the most part, I didn't think they really ruined my enjoyment of the show. The other thing I watched was the first 3 episodes of Oh Maidens in Your Savage Season. And it seems okay. Unfortunately for me, it's a little bit tragic to watch it, because to me it's more like front and center kind of what's wrong with our society in terms of teaching our next of generation things that they will want to know. We kind of have this in this regard. So Savage Season should kind of tell you, oh, so like first time learning to date and interested in the opposite sex sort of stuff. And that would be correct, except it's also kind of very worried about sex as a concept. And you know, that's it's like our main cast of characters, you know, these 5 girls kind of have differing views on sex, but the one I would call the main character, because we seem to see most of what I would call the development through her eyes, and she's kind of the most plain of the bunch, except that she's the one that kind of overreacts to the concepts of, oh my god, somebody's talking about sex, we're all gonna die. I'm not even sure if it's really quite correct to say it's that bad, but it kind of is like, yeah, this is the sort of thing that'll happen when basically you're not being factual. You're like, oh, well, I don't have to tell lies if we ever do talk about it, and oh, nobody ever talked about it at all. And so you kind of end up with generations that get a little lost, don't know how to handle themselves, don't know how the adults handle themselves, which is extra not helpful if the adults are way past hormonal period, which, you know, kind of tends to happen. Basically, and I can kind of understand there's a part of it that's not wanting to talk about it because, you know, that's kind of how you keep your own, I guess, behavior in check, I guess. But, you know, from a societal perspective, it's just kind of unfortunate because it basically means we're not passing knowledge down onto the next generation that could be really helpful to them. And this isn't the only place where we're doing it. You know, we're kind of doing that a little bit all over the place. In some places worse than others. In fact, if you were to ask me, well, I don't think this is controversial at all, but for a lot of the black community in here, that is one of the issues where that especially is known to come into play from the lack of fatherness in households. And why that might be is its entire own thing, but it is pretty much very common for people, and I don't think this is necessarily just black people. I think it's actually people of lower incomes in general, but it's definitely disproportionately affecting the black community. You know, basically, there's valuable knowledge that people tend to learn from having both parents, and traditionally, and this won't necessarily be everybody, it's like I think what a lot of kids kind of learn from their dad is kind of how to deal with the bullshit of the world. And this doesn't mean like how you make the bullshit go away, but sometimes it's also how you handle yourself with the bullshit. And I think this just causes the youth to kind of have to find their own ways of coping. And I think gang culture kind of comes from this sort of stuff, just because gangs are a way for groups of people to kind of manage their own lack of control of the world, their own combined with, you know, just how dangerous the world actually is for them, which unfortunately can also be caused by gangs. But that basically means that, you know, you want to be part of a gang in order to be able to have the protection of that gang, so another gang just doesn't say, oh, let me go eat that person alive, even though I'm not even sure that's necessarily a natural behavior of gangs as well. But, you know, I'm not an expert on these things. These are just weird thoughts, and this is all this is me going off on a wild tangent, and so getting back to this, you know, it's kind of, I don't find it cringe. Some people might, but I do say, oh, those poor kids. Here they are, completely speculating, so emotionally immature that they can't even just talk about, they can't even use the word sex. They're like, no, we have to change it to something that's slightly less vulgar version of the word. And I just think it's unfortunate. It's actually kind of related to Astra in that it kind of suggests that there's a lot of detached parenting sort of stuff going on here, even though it kind of shows that the parents still kind of care and stuff. They don't talk to the daughter in a way that makes me think that they're seeing her as kind of an adult that needs to be talked to. Instead, they just kind of see each other in lovey-dovey mode, and they love their daughter, but I think they're failing to pass information on, and that's basically for these 3 episodes. It's kind of like your first your kid's first relationship sort of show, except that there were, like a lot of people in real life, that sex exists. They don't seem to have a full grasp on it. They all seem to have different stories related to how to talk about and deal with that stuff. Some of it I would not actually call good, but it's entertaining enough. I didn't find anything about it that was just like, oh my god, this is saying that such and such group of people. It kind of knows these kids, and I call them kids. I don't know if they're middle school or high school, because I think they keep saying it, but I think their high school very recently graduated from middle school, but they might also still be middle school. I'm trying to remember if any character said anything, but I don't remember the details. All I know is, you know, basically your youth's going through the first romance, except they're very aware of the concept of sex, and they aren't conveniently ignoring it like a lot of adults think people should and pretend like people do, even though people don't. Now, I'm not sure they're as obsessed in this show, but they probably only seem obsessed because the issue comes up. And I guess the ideas of awareness and obsession is like, the girl walked in on her childhood friend while he was in the middle of spanking the monkey. I think that's... There's also fluffing his Garfield. But she didn't think he was bad for doing it. She was just afraid of the concept of sex, and that it was already something he was aware of and thinking of. So not a bad thing, if that makes sense. Like, it would have been bad if this was like the standard anime where she walks into his room and wakes him up out of his bed, but he has morning wood, and she freaks out and hits him. Because that I don't find that funny. In fact, I find that to be actually very scary, because it's a direct demonization of male sexuality. It's not like he was dreaming, oh, I should probably make sure I have a boner in case a girl walks in my room when I wake up. It's an involuntary response, and so it would be like, I don't know, it'd be like hitting a girl because she had her first period. It's not funny to me. And this doesn't do that. This doesn't have her thinking he's a bad person because of it, that he shouldn't do it. This is just her freaking out because, oh my god, this thing that exists that I'm afraid of exists. And, you know, I can think she's unreasonable about it, but at the same time, she's not being a bad person about it. Some of her friends might be. Friends wasn't the word I wanted, but you know, they're not too egregious, and it helps when your main character is more grounded and relatively rational. I mean, she's obviously irrational, but relative compared to that, you know, she's kind of grounded. So yeah, I could watch more. I do know that Try to Pick Up Girls Season 2 is actually a higher priority just because I do want to see what happened after season 1. And of course I had my complaint about Sword Oratorial, or Oradora. I don't remember what it was called, but yeah, I had my complaints about that one being... Like, the main problem is it's woven into the season 1, and it kind of feels like it feels like they have to put on the brakes on everything to kind of have Sword Girl acting just like she does in the scenes that cross over with season 1, but then it has to go back when it's like somebody running and then they're walking past the windows so the people on the other side don't see them running, then they're passing, they're running again. It Sword of Oratoria felt kind of like that. I don't even remember what the story was about. That thing. So for me, it's pretty weak, which is why I'm more interested in this, because, well, first of all, the more interesting story was season 1, you know, because that's what it was, and that one was a character growth story. Now the problem is it ended at a very okay character growth moment, so I don't know if this will ruin that or if this will be good. It's like, oh my god, why didn't I have this earlier? I do worry about that, but yeah, I'm probably going to watch, try to pick up Girls in a Dungeon season 2. But otherwise, I've been doing VR chat avatar stuff. So, for those of you unaware, VR chat is basically an advertising platform for Unity, which pretty much means that I think the VR chat devs get to kind of play around and do what they want. But, you know, they try to come up with things that are better for the community, and 3.0 is a bit of a mixed bag in that regard. Overall, I'd say it's better, but it really depends on what they do with Avatar 2.0 going forward. But, I guess, so VR chat's supposed to be an advertising platform. The idea is people use it, they get used to using Unity for stuff. When they go out and do work, they're like, well, I hope I can do it in Unity because I already know how to do a bunch of stuff in that, so I could learn new things easier. I think that's the idea, and I don't know if that's actually working or not, if it's worth the costs or not. But for the most part, it basically means that, other than that, VR chat is basically a place where you hang out with people, and depending on, you know, what kind of maps you make, you find, are out there, etc., you know, you might be doing something else in there. There are, like, Cards Against Humanity, maybe a couple worlds like that. There's plenty of ones with Spin the Bottle, Never Have I Ever, sorts of physical movement-based stuff. Nice and straightforward. But yeah, so when it comes to avatar stuff, for the most part, you have some default avatars. You have the ability to go to avatar worlds and find stuff that other people have uploaded and say, oh yeah, I'll use that one. And then you have the ability to upload your own, of course. And with Avatar 3.0, I'd say the two main problems with it are the rollout and the complexity. So the rollout issue is more one of, they just kind of threw it out there with disregard for whether or not there are tweaks to stuff in order to start being able to support it. Broke not even people's avatars, but people's experiences. Like, it seems to me like that release actually broke every single VR controller in some way or another out there, period. So for example, you have the ability to turn hand gestures on and off, and if you aren't using an index or a knuckle tracker or something that, you know, can track the individual fingers, then, you know, you basically have something where this button is thumbs up, this one is finger point, this one is open palm, things like that. And if you try to turn those off on things that don't have the tracking, then you go through this new menu and you will press the thing and you will basically have your hand stuck in a position, and it might be a different position on the other hand. So yeah, you yeah, that I heard some Windows mixed reality controllers were no longer able to exit the menus at all, so they kind of got stuck in them. And with the knuckle controllers, you're like, okay, well, he just mentioned knuckle controllers, those work, right? Well, they gave you the ability to turn hand gestures on and off, because it is very common to tie quick access to avatar functionality to hand gestures. So the most simple example is open hand and your avatar kind of closes the eyes and smiles, because that works if you're waving hello, if you're saying goodbye, or if you're head patting somebody. You know, so that one's a simple one, and that one is kind of always okay to have on to some regard, I guess. But it was very common to make it where items equipped if you did that. So for example, I tied the handgun thing to a keyblade appearing in my hand. Woo! Nice effect, and it could disappear. But the problem is, and I experienced this moving the index, because your hands just kind of randomly go into that position, having an entire item appear and disappear is very distracting, very annoying, and you used to be able to solve that with the index by turning off hand gestures with the push of a button. Like it used to be bound to something inconvenient. I bound it to one of the unused buttons because it works a lot better. And, you know, voila, I could just have my gestures turned off, the index controls, you know, the fingers, and then I'm like, oh, well, turn it on, and then turn it off, and now my keyblade is on, it's stuck on, and that's all good. Because it's easier to turn items on with a hand gesture than with the old emote system. Okay, now that's a whole lot of stuff, but it basically means that you need to at least transition some parts of your avatar so that they're using the new stuff instead of hand gestures for certain things, because now you can no longer conveniently turn gestures on and off. Instead, it's buried deeper and deeper into a menu. Woohoo! Yeah, the other problem with Avatar 3.0 is the complexity. So like, there's a problem with both in terms of not exactly knowing how to make things work. Like it's not like, oh, here, if I just fire up the program and here's a list of instructions. You kind of have to know, oh, well, I probably should set up some blend shape visemes in advance, because I'm going to assign them to lip shapes on the avatar. You don't have any idea of how eye tracking actually works. It's kind of a little bit hidden from you, but that also means that once you know how to use Cat's Blender plugin, you can just tell, okay, create the eye animation stuff for me. Okay, now we're all good. You know, basically there's, yeah, a lot of things like that, I guess. And so for your avatar's animator, instead of using an animation controller, you actually use an animation controller override, which basically meant that instead of dealing with the graphs, layers, and all that stuff, all you have to do is say, okay, when it runs forward, I want this animation. When it strafts to the side, I want it to use this animation. And I'm trying to think if it probably has a different straft left, straft right sort of thing. Not bad stuff, but oh, excuse me. As you can see, I am kind of tired. But with Avatar 3.0, a couple things have been made a little more obvious to the player, which means it's a few extra steps to do, stuff that was being done for you automatically, which is okay. But then you come to the animation stuff, and what they've given you is actually really good, but it also comes with you know, added complexity. So instead of somebody saying, well, I've got my 8 emote slots, I want to do Funky Town and the Ricardo dance and that stuff. You know, usually you could just drop something on the avatar, drop something in the controller, drop something on the avatar, drop something in the controller. You know, just nice and simple like that, and that's how you kind of built it up really fast. So Avatar 2.0 had the advantage that they could be built up really quickly and be very featureful in terms of what Avatar 2.0 could do. Avatar 3.0, I don't think you can do it anywhere near that easily. It sounds like you can't use animation controller overrides already, and I'm not sure if it makes sense to, because now you're defining menus in your own manner, and they have layers, and I guess the idea is, you know, it'd be pretty common to have a character doing a dance and then maybe have some sort of light effect going on to the beat of the music or something like that. But the way they've set things up, those two things in terms of being a dance that you have your character do are now completely separate layers, which suggests to me that either you can use the same animation in both layers and it just works, or you have to create two separate animations and two separate layers, and within each of those animation controllers, and what VR Chat calls a layer, the animation controller probably need their own copies of the same layer, except they play the same or they play slightly different animations or something like that. I don't know. So, and that doesn't even include the complexity that in order for these to basically work in that. Yes, okay. In order for them to work like they did before, you're probably also going to have to add special behaviors to your stuff, which I'm probably going to try and work on. Yeah. I'll have to do some experimentation on how to do it so that there isn't too much duplication of effort, I guess. Because basically, you're going to need to turn a bunch of avatar tracking stuff off so that the animation has control over it, and then do the animation, and then when the animation is finished, you turn it back on. Turn all that stuff back on. And I guess I have ideas on how I would do that, but so yeah, there will be some playing around with I'll need to do there. But let's put that aside, because the advantage of Avatar 3.0 is you have a lot more fine-grained control over your avatar's animation stuff. So with great control comes additional details you have to work on, right? And for me, this weekend was when I finally sat down and first figured out how to get my avatar into 3.0, which, you know, was tricky, but after some cleaning up and stuff, I got it. And then how to play with the new 3.0 stuff. In particular, so my avatar has always been Alice Margatroyd. Like, my first day VR chat, I went looking for stuff, and I kind of eventually settled on that. It wasn't my first choice, but then when I was starting to look at my first choice, I'm like, nah, I think I'll go with this one. And so later, when I started uploading avatars, I found the original MMD model that the original one was based off of, and uploaded that and started doing stuff with that. But you know, Alice Margatroyd, for those of you who don't know, is from Project Toho. It's not even spelled the way it sounds, so don't worry about it too much. But the main thing is, she's a magician who specifically specializes in manipulation of dolls in order to get stuff done. So when she attacks, you know, she'll have a doll go forward with a lance, or she'll have a ring of dolls that kind of roll forward or something like that. So I at some point I kind of figured out, okay, if I ever started working on super special neat stuff for my avatar, I would really need it to kind of involve doll or dolls or something like that. And before Avatar 3.0 was released, I had started playing around with Alice Margatroyd, and it had a doll floating over its shoulder. And I didn't do much work for it for a couple of weeks. Avatar 3.0 stuff was mostly about converting everything else to that, but didn't really change that. But the idea is, now with Avatar 3.0 and the ability to play around with the animation controllers in a more detailed level, I could actually try and do some intricate stuff that only works because Avatar 3.0 is out. A bunch of these things independently can be done, but they're awesome because of their combination And so as an example, I made it where my Alice has the ability to take the book off there and open up. It's not that smooth of an animation. That just disappears and the book's just here. And I might change that up in the future. But the idea is, you know, she could open a spell book. And initially I had ideas on using touch particles to do stuff there. I could see why that wouldn't scale too well. But with Avatar 3.0, what I instead did is I still have their action menu, but now I can have a camera from the doll rendering something on the book. Okay, that's something that could be done in Avatar 2.0. Even turning the camera on and off, that could have been done with Avatar 2.0. No problem. But instead of it just being attached to a fixed location on my chest, I mean, it is that. Now it has the ability to switch between that and a follower that came from vrlabs.dev. But it doesn't just end there, because now the follower is nice because you can move a bit and then it starts following you, right? So it makes it feel like the doll is kind of its own independent entity. And what I've worked on is making it where that target isn't just fixed there. I can also move it to like the edge of my fingertip, which isn't a very perfect thing. Basically, I'll go here, it flies here. If I move a little bit, it doesn't, but if I go over here, then it'll fly here, fly here. You know, that's kind of cool. It can move to the edge of my keyblade. It can move in front of me and face towards me so that its own camera is looking at me. And then I have the ability to turn on this other bigger mirror that or bigger camera TV that allows it to look kind of like a mirror. It's obviously not a mirror, but there's some behavior that's very similar to that. It's like, okay, well, all this stuff is individually doable with Avatar 2.0, but this is starting to get more complicated. And yes, it does get more complicated because I also made it where the doll has some lights built into it. You know, so like I can do this thing and this overhead light above us, or rather above the doll, turns on. Which is actually useful because even though I told you that it has the ability to follow certain points, I also made things that kind of disable certain parts of the follower just right so that I can tell it to stay still relative to me in the world, so I can walk around it and walk away from it and stuff like that. I have a sentry mode, so it's always facing towards me if I want it to. Pretty cool. Which basically means I can put it in the middle of a room and turn an overhead light on that just shines in an area around the doll, but then it's right there and always right there, which is pretty cool. I also made it where it turns on headlights so that you know, there's light directly in front of it coming out of the eyes. Although it doesn't look like it's coming out of the eyes, you just see it wherever it's looking. I've got thoughts on how I could probably do that one a little bit better. It can also emit just a radius of light from it, and that's a little configurable, and configurability is something that would be hard, if not completely impossible, to do in Avatar 2.0. But Avatar 3.0, a lot of this stuff is nice because it also translates to other people. So when somebody joins, if the doll is following my shoulder and it has headlights turned on and I have my book open, then when they join, my avatar will immediately have those, whereas Avatar 2.0, that wouldn't be the case. Now if I had the doll stationary here and then I moved over here and then somebody else loaded, I would see the doll stationary there, they'd see the doll stationary here. You know, there's that stuff. But the coolest thing I did was I kind of figured out how to go into the follower and make it where it just doesn't it doesn't target a thing. So instead I can take my book with the camera view of the doll, set it to manual mode, and then I can, you know, point the direction I want it to go with my hand. So it's like this isn't a turn left, this is, it'll be looking that way, it'll be looking that way, it'll be looking that way. It's weird, but it's not too bad. So I'd have my book here, and then I can just point and it'll move forward, and then stop and it'll stop. Which means I can just kind of fly around and explore maps, and it's got its own built-in lights, so it doesn't have problems when it's flying into dark areas far away from me. It's pretty cool. And you know, there's a lot of parts of this that would definitely be doable with Avatar 2.0. In fact, the manual control of the thing could be done with that. It's just hard, if not impossible, to make it where it can do that and it can fly. Like, I can make it fly really far away and then stop and then turn to sentry mode, so then it's turning the face back towards me. So like, I can fly it up into the air and then sentry mode, so it's shining headlights directly at me. That's pretty cool. Or I can have it fly far away, and then when I'm like, oh, you know, that's fun, okay, I tell it to return to following my shoulder, and it'll turn around and just automatically go back there. Very slowly, sometimes, because it can be very far away. But yeah, it's the configurability, because I can turn the lights on, and I'm not even done adding features to this, because I want to see if I can figure out how to make it move faster on command, because I think I have an idea on how to do that, and if I do, then I understand Unity a bit better than I thought I did. I want to add more effects to it so that it's also more featureful. Because, like, one thing that would be neat is if you've got the book, you've got the doll, and I make it where you can click on the book to teleport to where the doll is. Now, I won't be able to do that myself because it would be my own avatar, but other people would be able to transport to wherever my doll is. That would be pretty cool. And then also be able to transport back. That would also be pretty cool. Oh well, anyways, that's all a bunch of stuff. So, as you can see, Avatar 3.0 is a mixed bag, because 2.0 allows you to quickly throw together some stuff that will feel very full, but 3.0 allows you to do very intricate things. I kind of hope both are kind of kept around, because I know for some people, learning to do 3.0 stuff will be a lot harder for them, and I think in the long run they'll grow, but it seems like it's easier to just kind of move people up and not do this thing where you just kind of throw them into the deep end of the pool and say, yeah, and watch out for the sharks. So, it's all stuff. Anyways, I've babbled on long enough. Hopefully this has been an entertaining video, and y'all have a nice week.